Hi, I'm Patrick Glaser. I chair McKinley Advisors Research and Insights Practice and Business Transformation Practices. I'm here today with Artesha Moore, who is the President and CEO of Association Forum, and we're going to be talking a little bit about trends and associations, as well as what we found on McKinley's economic trends study that we do every year. Welcome, Artesha. Great to have you.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Artesha, we found a few overarching trends in the research we did. They include workforce shifts, economic disruption. There was some overarching sense that the regulatory and legislative environment was changing, so more regulation in the future. Sustainability commitments to the environment, and another big one was really around digital transformation. Do any of these buckets, these big ideas of trends, surprise you, or do they feel about right to you?
They actually feel about right to me. I mean, when I think about this, these trends are really what we've been dealing with for the last decade. So when you think back of 2013, and I remember reading an article in Harvard Business Review back in, I think it was 2014, Understanding New Power. And it just blew my mind because what it was talking about was the challenges that leadership was having with this new generation of workers. Right? Their energy and how to kind of harness them. And when I started to think about what that did to membership, so they weren't joiners, they weren't coming into the kind of industries in the way that we thought paying dues and professional development and those things. That was back a decade ago. So seeing it kind of play out now in these trends, not surprising. I think the other thing really for me was the work that I was able to do at the American Geophysical Union. So in 2018, they were working on their Centennial project and they were doing a new strategic plan. Had some strategic consultants come in and really talk to us about future drivers 50 years out. And two things came: this economic disruption, playing this out into a dystopian future, and this really trend of nationalization, right? People really starting to double down on their nation, being against each other. And when you look at what happened in the US in 2016, what we're seeing right now is not a surprise, right? So I think right now, these trends are really aligning with what we started to see bubbling up. But now I think this information is really powerful, right? To help us now say, okay, what are we going to do?
That's really interesting, Tisha. I remember speaking to you a number of years ago, and we were talking about the nature of the workforce. And at that point, you had shared with me some concepts that I think had been bubbling up for you for some time about, for fields, it may be the case that the folks coming into your profession are going to stay there throughout for their career. But as an association, you have to start thinking also about those that might come in and then might leave. And I was reminded of that when I looked at these results, and then also thought about how COVID and the Great Resignation and all of the burnout we've seen around the workforce, and maybe how their expectations of what a job and a career mean to them may have changed. And I'm wondering if that's part of it, if the expectations for someone coming into a career now are different. And maybe the heart of that is the changing economy and how people expect to have to change their skills throughout their career. But it strikes me that the way that we think about our careers now as folks that are a couple of decades or more in might be a little bit different than those that are coming in. Do you think that's right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So not just in the work that I actually did with you around understanding talent pool. And when I was at the AGU in workforce development, it was also an aha for me. It doubled down on what I've been feeling, right? Because my own career has been this kind of fabric of a beautiful quilt of a whole bunch of stuff that just jammed together because my mind is like a freakazoid, right? So I was able to work through different lenses. But that's how a lot of young professionals are. They have this appetite for applied curiosity. They want to drive real change. And here's the other part that I don't think that we're as ready for. They're very entrepreneurial. They have the tools now to advance their own ways of doing things. So they can get paid for their content, they can get paid for their abilities. Think of Fiverr, think of some of these other things, right? They have a lot of opportunity. So they don't want to then come into an organization that is so heavily structured governance and you got to work up this and bureaucracy and those things because they can't have immediate impact.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece, again, it's kind of this trend that's been leaning in, more entrepreneurial people coming. But here's the thing that you said that I think about a lot. They ain't gonna stay, period. Get over that. Only Artesha is gonna stay 15, 20 years, right? I like comfort. I like to have my, shoes under my desk for decades, whatever that looks like. But the next opportunity is always hungry. And I want to drive change. So it isn't like 20 years ago where we were thinking titles and then I get to the table and I get to have a voice. Yeah, nah. So we have to rethink about talent and really ownership, right? Like, what does ownership mean? Owning the problem, owning the solution, owning it at every level.
One of the ideas you shared was some of the, if I'm going to kind of recast it a little bit, some of the disharmony that driven maybe by that nationalism and other tendencies throughout the country. And then you just noted another point about how new entrants into the workforce have different expectations about how they're going to engage in leadership. Those things right there, those sort of sources of disharmony create a new kind of challenge for the association CEO, don't they? In sort of managing through all of that.
Yeah, and that's where I think right now the need of CEO community is really important because the need to hyper listen, not just active listening, like we've been trained, right? Listen, ask questions. I mean, hyper, open up everything, be open to being wrong. That's scary as hell. It just is. And so right now, when you're dealing with maybe a traditional industry, real estate, healthcare, right? Kind of engineering. And you have tens of thousands of people. They're not all going to be in one mind. If you're global, US versus, right? Like there's a lot of thinking. How do you sit in one person, one seat when you have your own values and lead strategically?
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. And it's harder every day when more people are living longer and beautiful, long lives and are engaging more. Yay. Now you've got 4 generations. You've got to deal with the TikTokers, as my niece said, is for old people, but I doubt that. But the TikTokers, as well as my mama and them. And that's a lot. That's a lot of people and a lot of views. And as a CEO, you need community to say, well, wait, what are you dealing with, Patrick? Because maybe that could help me. Or how are you stealing yourself up in this so that I don't lose it?
How have you seen associations shift to address some of these changes, or have you? Do you think we're a little bit behind, or do you see some possibility and some opportunity there?
There's always possibility. And I think the reason why I smile big, right, in that is because I always think we're behind, right? I live in the future, right? I'm over here in the Mad Max future with Tina Turner, right? I'm out here. So I think that right now, what I would say is we are adapting to our changes because we are representative of the business of the heart. Right? Like we're volunteer driven workforce across all whatever association. That is uniquely positioned and different. We can't make stakeholder kind of business decisions, cut this and do that, right? Because change actually has to come through in the power of the people.
Yeah.
And that makes it difficult. And I think beautiful in that way too. Because if you can tap into that other piece that's happening right now is that economic piece that came up too. If you could tap into this hyper focus and align with the more of your people, I think that it positions associations to really drive great change because we are then aligned around values of whatever your industry is to be able to drive real change. But it's a lot when they're not coming back to the workforce. They are like seeing power of community, like, well, I can get that on LinkedIn. That's not the same as what we do, right? Like that's not the same as what we do. So I think we're well positioned, but it's a lot when you got to then go back to the old fellows committee and say, hey, wait, hold up. We need to get on TikTok. And they don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, those services aren't the same, but they cut in and they challenge us, right? Because they get into a little part of what we're doing. And devalues perhaps maybe a little bit of our work. What you're talking about to me speaks as the sort of role of the CEO as a facilitator. You're getting these people together, you're building community. Sometimes that's messy. What advice would you have to maybe a new CEO that's entering their role, and this is the landscape? It's messy, it's filled with conflict and minefields at times. What are some initial steps they could take, or how should they think about their job?
Um, Definitely think of your job as a facilitator
Absolutely.
and a connector of people. So what I'm bold of hip hop, right? So ego is something that is just ingrained in a child of the 70s, right? It just is, right? You're bold and you're out here. So the first thing that I've been doing as a new CEO is dialing that down. As a hyper focused and achiever of whatever that was, that's not what my job is now. It's not to win. Do you see my face? I'm a reforming capitalist. It's not to win. Maybe a little bit, we're businesses, but it is to win for the heart. And so how do I still myself? I've gotten into meditation. I started to restudy my Buddhist practice. To get better at listening, I've actually stopped talking. And you know me, Patrick, you know me for a long time. When I ain't talking, I'm asleep. But I've started to get real quiet. I don't have the answer. I don't even know. I don't even know what the question is sometimes. And that was the aha. As the leader, my job is to listen, to hear, and to kind of channel the room of the membership, not to have the answer. That's an unlearning that I'm still working on.
Me too. That's great advice. Thank you, Artesha. Anything else that you would like to share to associations or to association leaders?
Be wildly curious. I've started reading comic books again, like old school Marvel, actually in print, sorry, sustainable, but print. And one of the things that activated is the fourth grader in me.
Yeah.
That I loved pretend and imagination and those things. And as a leader, I am about fun. If we don't make what we do look fun in some, I'm not saying be wildly just ridiculous and laughing all the time. I'm saying joy. They don't want to do what we do. So I say lean into joy, whatever that looks like for you. I love dancing, so get me on the dance floor anytime. And then leaders, remember what we are doing. We steward the future.
I love that. Thank you, Artesha. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah.